All right. Good evening. Welcome to the June 10th, 2024 regularly scheduled work session. Tonight, there are 6 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card. If you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public comment cards will be accepted. Will the city clerk please sound agenda item A?
Good evening, Mayor. That first item A is the presentation of the Fire Station 45 Public Safety Memorial Plaza art. It's presented by our Fire Chief, Gabe Ben Musa.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm just here to present you with the idea that of a public safety memorial plaza art that was approved by the DRB. So just want to give you an update on that. So the public safety memorial plaza, the Milton Public Safety, will include an arbor with the flags that directly face the entrance. And the public art will be a fundraising campaign led by the Milton First Responders Foundation. They were willing to take the lead on that and fundraise for the proposed art, which is a statue of a Milton firefighter, in a sense, in the gear, and then as well as a police officer. And then with that, those will be placed sort of like at the corner of the arbor facing the flags. That's what the plan is. And then with the bricks, sort of like a name on the paver brick, that a Milton citizen, if they choose to, they could have their family name engraved on the bricks, much like what I'm showing in the picture. This is from the National Fire Academy. So people can honor loved ones, service members, and they'll be able to do that through the Milton First Responders. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Good. Do we have any public comment on this?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Any staff comments or anything? No? Looks good. Thank you. Okay, will the city clerk please sound agenda item B?
Mayor, item B is priority projects update, and our first update will be on the Deerfield implementation plan. Our Community Development Director, Mr. Bob Buscemi.
Did you want to say anything or just jump in?
Just run into it. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're just giving a brief update on where we are with the Deerfield implementation plan. And it's moving along very nicely. So hold on, let me just get slideshow. Okay. I think I got that right. Okay. So the consultant selection status, we received 3 proposals from planning and architectural firms. They were all very good firms. And we're working with procurement right now on the selection and award of their contract. So I guess until we actually get we did the scoring and we selected a firm, but until procurement reaches out to them and negotiates and gets that all awarded, they asked me not to release the name of the firm until they've actually got that all underway. But it's moving along very nicely, and it should be done very soon. Here, I'll show you. So we issued the RFP on April 11th. The proposals were due May 13th. We reviewed all the proposals and had them in by May 31st. And in June, we're doing the final selection, so they'll be talking to the awarded consultant. And we should have the contract and the total award in front of council in July. That'll be very nice. And they were all great firms, by the way. Okay, the next thing we're working on, which we're working on now before we get the consultant on board, of course, once the consultants are on board, they'll aid a little bit more in their communication coordination as well. For the meantime, we've met with concerned homeowners and with GDOT representatives. And some of the concerns that we've heard is the width of the sidewalks, converting permanent easements to temporary easements. And this will allow new landscaping to be planted after the construction is completed. So initially, GDOT went through and had a lot of permanent easements there. And we're trying to work with them now to convert them into a temporary easement. And they do that when they're doing the land acquisition portion. So we can work with them. And then once you get a temporary easement, then it will allow these abutting property owners to start replanting. And so we can work with them and really get into some of their concerns. We've also approached Forsyth County, and we're making connections with them because I think, they're abutting us and their portion of Highway 9. We were, from a staff perspective, we're a little concerned to make sure that their portion of Highway 9 kind of, mirrors a little bit of our standards. I'm not going to say that they're going to meet our standards in any way, but, we want to make sure that we're in touch with them and they understand the importance of what we're doing in our Deerfield implementation plan, so that they understand that, that segment of their roadway is just as important. And I think Milton has a strong voice in that to say that. They were very open. They were very interested in communicating with us, and we've gotten all their standards down pat. And as developments occur within that segment, we'll have better communication. They'll reach out to us and say, yes, somebody's coming in. This is the proposed use. This is what they're looking to do. And this way, it gives us the opportunity maybe to approach their planning commission when they have public hearings to say, look, these are some of our concerns from Milton's standpoint. This is what we'd like implemented. And maybe we can show the commission, Forsyth County commissioners, that we're looking to maintain a certain level of character and standard there as well. And so far, they've been great. They've been very open and forthcoming. We're also meeting with some real estate brokers in the area just to get an idea of where the market is. The consultants do have a financial portion in their RFP that they'll be looking at. We'd like to work with local real estate just to say, listen, what does the market look like? What are some of the pitfalls? What are people coming and asking for? So I think that's important, just to kind of get a feel before we even start, to kind of look at the end result and say what's going to be marketable out there, so that we can work with that. Also, when it comes to communications, I've been working with Greg, our communications director, and he's not here tonight because he doesn't usually come to work sessions, but I just wanted to give him a shout out. I mean, I've really been working with him, and we've come up with a really strong communications plan that the two of us have really developed. And Greg gave me some really good input here. So I just wanted to share some of the things that he was looking to do. Okay, one is he's going to create a Deerfield implementation plan webpage, which I thought was good. So people can just hit that and go right to see everything we're doing in Deerfield. We're going to come up with a Deerfield implementation plan logo. We're going to install simple signage around the Deerfield area. And some of this, I'll show you later, some of the wayfinding, I'm even thinking of temporary signage that would be in there. And getting down to things like little QR codes on the signs. People can hit the QR code. So all different ways to communicate. That's really what we've hit here. Every which way, because everybody has a different preference. Some people like text messaging, and some people look at Facebook. So, but even with text messaging, as we create new things that are happening in Deerfield, if the people join that messaging of text, they'll receive a text. They'll go bing, and they'll see it, and they'll say, hey, something is happening in Deerfield. If you're interested, you can go to this webpage and look at it. So we're really trying to do a lot of outreach in a lot of different facets here to maintain what it is we're doing. We're going to showcase the content on Milton ga.gov's main page, so that's important. We're going to be doing surveys. Once we get the consultant on board, they'll have more of those tools. We'll be doing a lot of surveys, a lot of gathering input data. We'll be doing pop-ups and different charrettes and different events for the community to keep coming to. We'll be regularly posting engaging content on various platforms, which is like Facebook, Instagram, X, they call it X now, I guess, and LinkedIn. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be doing what he calls, he names it stick in the mud signs. We'll be putting some signs in showing people what we're doing and where it is. Paper communications, which would be newspaper advertisement, flyers, and possible mailers. We're going to be looking at video, email, texting, and other alternatives to get the word out so that we can get a nice subscription going. So it's just briefly to show you that we're really working on a very, very strong and robust communications plan for the implementation plan. And the wayfinding, now wayfinding is one of our short-term work programs. Nita Jubin is actually heading this up, economic development. And she's been doing a great job with it so far. She's here tonight, just in case you need questions. But she's kicking it off with project meetings with staff. We're talking about getting the scope of work for the wayfinding in Deerfield, gateway signage, and temporary. The temporary is very important because I really want to see, because I don't want to spend the money putting permanent signs up while they're doing the construction. But on the same token, I want to get something up there for the existing businesses to know that we're backing them, we're promoting them, and we want to keep them thriving, and to try to get Milton residents to keep shopping in those areas, even though it is harder to drive through Highway 9. I do it every day now just to see the experience, and it's taken me like twice as long to get in because they're stopping traffic and doing utility work and things like that. So it is a little cumbersome right now to see how it's going. So we want to maintain those businesses and try to help them. So I think this will do a lot of that. And the RFP is presently underway. She's put together the scope, and once we get that done, we'll run it through Steve, and if Steve's okay with it, then we'll probably get it out on the street so we can get a consultant hired to do that as well. And then landscape options. Landscaping is a big thing that the council's told me that they really are interested in making sure that we have a robust landscape plan. So right now we're studying and developing landscape options, and Sandra's here. She's our city arborist. She's here tonight too to answer any questions. But she's been doing a really great job. She's been researching all the GDOT requirements when it comes to landscaping. So we really fully understand and digest all their standard requirements, right? And if we can work within some of those limits, because she's created a whole plant material list that has several different options on it. I mean, her list has got ground cover, trees, shrubs. So there's different options that we can implement. So depending on, say, the width of a median, now, if it's wide enough to support a tree, then we'll recommend having a shade tree there. If it's narrow, then maybe you just have some grasses like towards the intersections and things. So there's different options we could do, and what we've been doing is running around and looking at all different areas in Georgia where GDOT has worked, and what kind of landscaping they've actually installed and how successful it is on installation and at maturity, to say, hey, how do these things look? Let's take photos, and at some point we'll show it to the community and see what they think, and then we'll present it to council and say, what do you all think? And this way we can show multiple options on this landscaping, and it's not just in the medians. We have in the right-of-ways, in front of walls, behind walls, and on adjoining property owners' private property. What can that landscape screening look like? And what could we do? And then will the owners be willing to maintain it? And all the owners I've spoken to so far have said, Bob, we're willing to chip in to pay for some of it, and we're willing to chip in to maintain it. We'll do it. We'll take it 100%. I shouldn't say chip in. They're willing to do it because they all want to see the success of Highway 9 and they all want to see some greenery and landscape. Other areas that we've been studying together, Sandra and I, is pocket parks along the roadway. We're looking at different pocket parks and different things that, quite frankly, Councilman Jacobus has brought up several different areas that he thought would be potential pocket parks, and we're studying all of those. We're actually taking the roadway map and coloring it to identify the different elements. Where are the walls? Where are the curbs? Where are the roads? What's the widths? So that when the consultant comes on board, we kind of direct them and say, look, this is what we're really looking for. Really get them up to speed fast, give them into high gear and say, this is options that we can do, and start showing those to the public to see what they think, and especially the stakeholders that are in that area specifically. And then, of course, council's final decision, then we'll go to GDOT. Now, if it's outside of their requirements, and there might be some areas that are just so close, like if it's 9 feet and they're asking for 11 feet, yes, we might come back and say to GDOT, look, either we need relief or, we're going to figure out a way to kind of circumvent some of those rules. So, because I think we're close. Now, if it's 4 feet and they need 11 feet, I'm not even going to propose that because it's just too far. But if it's close within some tolerance, I think we have a chance to really get a good, robust landscape plan in there. So we're putting that all together right now. And that's looking really, really well. And then just last, I just remind the council that on June 3rd, you did extend the moratorium. So that's out there. And I think that's going to help us. It ends in December 2nd. So that's, I think that should really bring us to a good point, and we might even get to some place earlier than that. So we're really looking to advance this along. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yep. Any questions for Bob?
Yeah.
Councilman Jacobus?
Bob, when we look at the width of the sidewalks, what is the state's, the mention has always been 10 foot wide. And I know originally it was 10 foot wide on both sides. What does the state expect to be on 10 foot wide? Is it golf carts? Is it just walkers? Is it bikers? Is it a little bit of everything?
Well,
I'm
we
getting
have-
questions from
We do
people.
have 8, 10, and 12 different segments.
8, 10, and 12?
Yes. Yeah, Sarah's here. I don't know if you want to kind of come up and talk about what their expectation from GDOT is on the 10-foot wide side.
So with the wider width is when you expect that people will be passing each other, so walking both directions on the sidewalk is part of the width, as well as bicycle usage and bicycles passing each other. So it's kind of those two components. Is there going to be directional traffic with pedestrians and bikes going each way that they may need to pass, as well as the presence of bicycles? They do allow PTVs if there's a 2-foot beauty strip, and a 10-foot path is what their current standard is for PTV usage.
So there is the possibility of having some PTV traffic on Highway 9 when we're all said and done.
There could be, yes, if we do have in our PTV code that it's a path that would be designated by the city as available for PTV usage. So it has to meet the criteria and be designated by the city for it to be legally able to have a PTV.
And are we going to have the same width on both sides, or are we doing like 8 on one side, 10 on the other? Is that what they're looking at now in order to fit it in certain spots?
Right, yeah. So the current plan does show in certain areas it narrowing down to 8, which still allows the multi-uses, but technically wouldn't allow the PTVs because it's not the 10 feet.
Okay, thank you.
But the feedback I've been getting from residents is that, does it necessarily have to be the same width on both sides? Could we have like a residential side that's narrower and then the commercial side that's wider? So it's something that we're going to study with the consultant to really see, because we don't want to lose the potential of having that multi-use trail but is it necessary on both sides? So I don't want to come up with a yes or no. I'd like to study it and
But
then
in-
show it to you, the council, and see what you think.
But in most cases, the state's already determined what their outbounds are going to be, correct? What the widths are. So narrowing it isn't necessarily going to change where a wall is or something, correct or no?
That's pretty much correct. Right
Okay.
now, the walls are set for driver safety, so that setback is predetermined.
Okay.
So it's harder to move a wall. I could make the sidewalk a little narrower and get some more landscaping in there. Just that the one thing that narrowing it would do is green it up a little bit, soften it, make it look a little bit more, Milton-esque
Okay.
versus just, harsh concrete all the way to the wall. So from the edge of curb to the back of wall or to the face of wall would be all concrete. The other way would have some greenery. So I'd like to actually illustrate those visually in 3D and then show it to the council and see which ones you like. I don't really want to make that decision now. I'd like to study it, and then that's part of the RFP requirements is to study all that, bring it back and show it to the public, see what they think, show it to council, see what you all think. And then we can see what we can do. Right now, I'm just trying to find out what my left and right limits are, so to speak. No pun with you, but just to see what's acceptable and what wouldn't be. But I think they'd be open to all of these ideas. In talking with them, they said, Bob, if that's really what the city's looking for and it meets our standards right now, then we're not going to say no to it. We'll be open-minded. So let's see, let's study it.
So a couple of questions.
I'm done.
So first off, I want to say 4 months to turn an RFP in my world of software, that would never happen. So well done. That seems like a pretty quick turn. But to dovetail on Councilman Jacobus's question, if it's 10, 12, drops down to 8, if it drops down to 8 at any point, then that path can no longer be, a PTV won't be able to go the length of it at that point because it will eventually come up
correct.
upon, an 8-foot strip that it
Yeah.
shouldn't be on, right?
Right. So it's a long corridor, and it does go up into some areas up on the north end that I think are less dense, less commercialized. So we could look at that too and say, hey, I'd like to at least achieve 10 at least on one side so that somebody can PTV it into the core, so to
Mhm.
speak, of it. But that's why we're studying it now, to see what we can do to really, ascertain what this is going to look like, how it's going to function, what would the signage be. And I'd like to show it. I'd like to actually get that. That's the whole purpose of the implementation, is to actually have the consultant show the council what this is going to look like visually, driving through to see how the 2 or 3 different options play out. And then have the council say, yeah, we like this look for Milton, or that's too hard. Or this, once you see it, it will
Yeah,
tell
just
the
thinking
tale.
longer term, you're going to have hopefully an active park over that way, and to be able to take a PTV from Crooked Creek down there, if you have a spot where all of a sudden it's not 8 feet, and now it can't go any farther, it's like, well, dang,
That doesn't really work.
doesn't work. Yeah.
And that's a big, dense, community where I think a lot of people would like to PTV towards the center of town or where the activity nodes are. Because I'm looking at this and saying, we have Deerfield as a district, but I want the consultants to also look at this potentially sub-districts within a district. Now, we have the Mayfield district, which is a sub-district within the Crabapple district. So it's not something the city hasn't done before, and it's being very successful because the Mayfield district would be a low scale, more open, and that's one of my other presentations I'm going to show you, that we're really working with those landowners to kind of get these concepts going. So Deerfield could potentially have the same thing. I don't mind exploring some sub-districts within the district so that the council could say, okay, in this area, maybe the community wants something different than a different section, that when those community people are saying, okay, we'd like something more dense, more urbanized, more nightlife kind of activity. Other areas, they might say, look, we really like the quietness. We don't want it to look dense. We don't want a lot of commercial. We want to kind of keep it, but it's a long Highway 9. And then there's other areas of Deerfield. There's areas that we have the commercial nodes, and those areas might have different sort of sub-districts, right, into those, like where the Verizon and where the park is, all of those little nodes might be a little different. So I'd like to keep all of these options open, explore them all, bring them back to council and say, what do what's the feeling on these things? And, we don't have to have too many, but just one or two sub-districts within a district, I think really help it out.
Sure. Sorry, one more quick question. So you mentioned working with Forsyth County and getting them to maybe not up to our standard, but to at least make it so that it's an easier transition to and from our city.
Yeah.
You don't foresee them asking for us to fund anything
No, not
on
at
their
all.
side of the,
No,
okay,
not
just
at
making
all.
sure.
No. But I would like to know when projects are coming in, what projects they have coming down the pike. Maybe we have some input on them. Maybe we can go to meetings and say, hey, look, this is what we think. Maybe we could put some conditions on certain projects and say, look, we don't want a lot of outdoor storage or, things that we
Car
think
lots.
or cars that we think would hamper the visual aesthetic of that corridor. And they, listen, like anything, I think people are open when they have a planning commission meeting and we can come in and talk about it and say, look, these are the great things we're doing on ours. And this would be a big impact. If you put a few of these conditions on, it would really help out the corridor. I think it's worth a shot to be there, to show our presence and to show that we care about the rest of the corridor. So I'm not asking them to do anything. They're not asking us to do anything, but I would like to know what they're doing more openly so that it's not happening and I'm not aware of it. Because I think it would, even if I came back and told the council, look, this is what they're looking to do. We have a strong objection to it. At least the council's aware of it. Maybe, we could reach out to them a little bit and say, hey, what do we, I think it would be worth a shot to try to maintain that corridor because Milton does sort of skew it as it goes up past Francis and all. We're not that far away, even though there's a small break in that Highway 9 area. It does affect our residents. I'd like to really make sure that we at least maintain it and I could come back and report.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We have great communication with Alfred and Roswell, and so, Forsyth makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Are we good on that? We're going to go to large lots real quick.
Yeah, large lots. I'm going to have Shubha come up. You got it? Okay. You should be able to.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Shubha Jangam. I'll be updating you on large lot project. This project originated from comprehensive plan, during which we had a lot of community. The community overwhelmingly shared that the Milton's rural character should be preserved. And because the large lot contributes greatly into this rural character of Milton, this project focused on large lots. And at the same time, the Milton strategic plan was being prepared, and that also had one of the goals that's kind of resonated with like promoting equestrian and a farm lifestyle. So as you can see here, that there was a lot of consensus on the desired outcome of preserving the rural character. So our kind of efforts began to find out how we can help the property owners, the large lot property owners, in keeping the large lot or maintaining the farm lifestyle. And I want to actually acknowledge that we currently have some incentives that create future large lots, okay, when somebody is subdividing their lot. So, and those incentives are very successful. We have seen lots of minor lots coming up recently as a result of those incentives. So this project focuses on supporting the existing or the current large lot property owners in keeping the farm lifestyle. So we started with that goal, and we formed a focus group of Milton residents to talk to, and the group members were all large lot property owners, but they also had different background. You know, some of them had agricultural business, some of them had equestrian farm. They real estate agents, or they were developers or builders, and some of them had experience with TDR, which is a Milton's program of transfer of development rights, and the COA is a state program of tax assessment. So now I talked to all these focus group members one-on-one. I had an interview with them, and this was like an open dialogue to exchange ideas. And at the same time, I had some questions to ask them all. And we kind of discussed during these meetings, we had a closer look at land use that are permitted in Milton by right, or some of them that require use permit. We looked at reducing barriers for covered riding arenas or lighted riding arenas for large lot. We looked at being more flexible about accessory buildings such as running sheds and guest houses, discussed some of the COA or TDR information. And two of the focus group members were MEC members. So they were very interested in helping our efforts to further our efforts. So we had more discussions with them about how can they be more helpful. So all this talking to public was part of my first phase of the project, which is initial engagement and interviews. And right now we are kind of in the second phase where we draft recommendations and bring it to you to get your feedback on which way we should go. And once we have that feedback and we have kind of recognized that these are the three things that we need to do, we will be moving into the final phase, which will be now public hearing for those text amendments. So that's the plan for this ag incentive project. And I'm happy to come back and discuss each of these recommendations next time so that we can start working on them. That's all I have for this project. Any comments or questions? I'm open to it.
Any questions or comments for Shuba? Thank you.
Thank you.
Active parks. All right.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll be providing an update on active parks, specifically on the site analysis and feasibility study for the Crescent property. In this update, I'll provide an overview of the property, go over the study and where we are now, and share some future opportunities for community input. Here you can see the site and what's immediately adjacent to the property. You have seen this before. The pictures on the left show what you see as you drive by today and some signs that share and take you to the latest updates on the process located on the city's website. In May, we contracted with a consultant to provide us with a feasibility study and site analysis of the property off Deerfield Parkway to provide staff and ultimately council with a better understanding of what can truly be done on the land and an estimate of what it could cost to build. It's important to note, as I've reminded everybody I've spoken to or presented to consistently along the way, that these are just sketches. While they may be helpful, they're not official plans of what the park will necessarily look like if we decide this location is a viable place to build. We will embark on a full comprehensive design, including the creation of construction documents, if council decides to proceed with the acquisition of this land. These sketches are simply providing a little visual to support the feasibility study. The consultant provided two sketches that were brought before PREB in their May meeting to get feedback from both our board and the community. This first sketch shows a concept maximizing the recreational opportunities and provides more parking than the other for the users. Both sketches have the same number of fields, same field sizes within them as well. As shown, there are 2 rectangular multi-purpose fields, 4 youth baseball fields, 2 tennis courts, and 16 pickleball courts, along with all the necessary accessory amenities such as bathrooms, restrooms, and a perimeter trail. Here's the concept that PRAB preferred to work from, where there was an opportunity to have additional connectivity to both the neighboring property and Highway 9. Again, there's no difference to the number of fields. They're just shuffled around a little bit differently. There is less parking on this concept, and since the creation of both concept sketches, we have discovered a small area of wetland that will be accounted for in the final product that will be provided to us later this month. And that wetland area, it derives from a spring right here, and then it's a little stream that runs by, and we have to keep 50 feet from that for any impervious construction. Can you see my mouse pointer on this corner right here?
Yeah.
The PRAB meeting did provide some valuable feedback from both the board and the public that the consultant can include in their final sketches and recommendations. They're working on that now, and staff expects delivery of this sketch and the cost estimate in the coming week to 10 days. PRAB's feedback included both concepts were good, but they did prefer the concept that included the interparcel connectivity that could ultimately connect to Highway 9, ensuring that park safety was still there for the visitors that were there at the park. Inclusion of some pickleball courts in the final plan, but not necessarily the 16 courts that were depicted in that original sketch. Additional parking to hit the more of a recommended or desired 300 parking spaces that we should need 50 per field. And lastly, adding batting cages for the baseball users. This was just something that was caught. It's something that easily could have been added, but that was part of the feedback we received as well. Staff is planning on gathering additional public input once again on June 24th in a special called Parks and Rec Advisory Board workshop meeting, where the final sketch and cost estimates are expected to be available. We'll then present the feedback and findings to council next month in July, prior to the expiration of the due diligence period for the property. In a presentation later this evening, Bernadette will go over some revised budget numbers for this project as cost estimates continue to come in higher than expected on park-related projects. At this point, I'd be answer any questions. Mayor?
I got a couple, but I'll
Go ahead.
turn it over. Two quick questions. How many parking spaces are at Bell now?
Bell has almost 400.
Okay. And concept B has what that we're looking at now?
Concept B has 280.
Okay.
And concept A has around 240. With the on-street parking, they were giving us kind of a rough, about 240, but this concept here has 280.
Are they the same amount of fields as Bell? It's
Correct.
2, okay.
But you also have a bunch of pickleball courts and tennis courts that you don't have at Bell. So you'll have, I mean, pickleball courts are going to drive a lot of cars.
Is there, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you go to Bell Memorial Park, even on a Saturday, there's always a lot of parking available. The only time we really have ever run into issues is when we have big tournaments out there and the fields are filled with, like the rectangles have 3 or 4 fields going at the same time. They'll turn them the other way and run small-sided fields, and then those fields are all full. But we don't typically have that much.
Does the 400 include the gravel?
Yes.
So that's
It does.
the gravel that isn't used as much. Yeah. With a quick question, with that spring or that wetland, if we want to do the interparcel connectivity, how are we going to be able to keep both rectangle fields?
They are looking at, as we speak,
Okay.
how they can reshuffle things to make it all work and accommodate the parking. The revisions to the reducing the pickleball numbers, and they're looking at potentially, actually the north is to the right, but on the right side, maybe have the interparcel go through there and like a bridge over the stream,
Okay.
potentially. But it might be feasible that the interparcel connectivity just might not be the best avenue to go down.
If we lose
If
the
we
field.
wanted to keep all the
Yeah.
fields.
Got it.
Is it possible for us to talk to Verizon about using their parking areas on a regular basis, whether we lease that? I mean, when we need it, they're going to be empty. You know, we need it at nights, on weekends, and usually that land is, you know, they need it 9 to 5, even if they start to lease those buildings.
Yep.
So I just hate to see, when you drive by that, there's so many trees. It's such a nice piece of land. I'd hate to see us just keep adding parking places if there's a possibility of using parking in the area that already exists. You know, maybe we could do something creative to get people from one side to the other, but
That was my first thought. But yes, and there's also the office complex to the north where City
Well,
Hall
the
used to
connection with
exist.
Fry's, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be, I mean, it's going to be connected. So
Yeah.
having, that would be a safer option for the pedestrians.
and Verizon, I mean, goes the whole way of our piece of property. I mean, it's just, I would hope somebody would touch base with them and see if there's something we can do.
Happy to do so.
Any other questions?
Oh, you hit mine.
Do we have any public comment on any of those 3 items?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, will the city clerk please stay on agenda item C?
C is Arnold Mills Small Area Plan Status Update. Ms. Shuba Gangam.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Shubha Jangam again. I'm a project lead for this Arnold Mill project. This is another important project from comprehensive plan that we are focused on this year. And this is very consistent with the smart land planning goals of strategic plan. And as shared previously, the goals of this project are threefold, really. One is to explore and develop city's vision for the corridor with corridors built out with community input. The second one is to identify contextual design elements for 2 nodes, and I'm going to talk about those 2 nodes in a couple of minutes. Third one is to create an action plan to work with other jurisdictions, such as GDOT, Roswell, and Cherokee County. So this is my project plan. Phase 1, we already started. We finished pretty much. We did our public kickoff meeting, and we had a digital survey last month. We got really good response to our digital survey, and it kind of reaffirmed that some of the previous sentiments about how this corridor needs to come alive. So we are grateful for that. And then now we're getting ready for the design workshop, and this is scheduled this Thursday at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I'm going to talk about that one too in the next slide. But once, and we're going to have another open house after design workshops in the second phase. So once we have this concept plan ready, we're going to move into the recommended policies or the changes. And then once we have a consensus about what do we want, what kind of text amendment or any kind of overlay or rezoning that we want, we can move into the adoption cycle of this plan. So as I said, we are preparing for the Thursday's workshop, which is going to be at Ebenezer Methodist Church on Arnold Mill Road on June 13 between 4 to 7 p.m. The public is welcome to join us anytime between this time to participate in engagement. We have 3 things on the agenda, 3 activities. We're going to have a high-level schematics for the 2 nodes. And as you can see on the map here, 2 yellow areas. Those are the 2 nodes I'm talking about. And this has been kind of these nodes have been identified, and this has been communicated to the residents, and it's been accepted by the community that, these two nodes are appropriate for a little more intense activities than the rest of the corridor. So we are looking closely at these two areas. The second activity that we're going to do at the workshop is getting a feedback on a 4-lane road design of the highway. Given the current traffic data and the capacity of the road, it's kind of it's apparent that the GDOT is going to make this a 4-lane road, and we are getting ahead of them and getting communities' feedback on how this road should look like. So we have some sketches to show them, and then we'll be getting their feedback on the road design. And finally, we have a survey for architectural preferences in this area. We will also have a summary of digital survey that we conducted, and we'll be kind of have it during the presentation for the community. Well, that's all we have, and hope to see you on Thursday.
Any questions for Shuba? Do we have any public comment on this one?
We do not, sir.
Okay, thank you, Shuba. The city clerk will please sound agenda item D.
Mayor D is the Mayfield District update. Our Community Director, Development Director, Bob Buscemi.
Again, good evening, Mayor and Council. Let me get this up. Okay. Okay. So tonight, I just want to give you a quick update on the district in Mayfield. I think the council's aware that we had the concept plan and everybody liked it and approved it. So we're slowly, from a staff perspective, we're really trying to transition from a concept plan to really implement this plan. And there's a couple of priorities that really have to happen. And I've done this on the other quadrants, the north east quadrant, the north, the quadrants that we're in now. So we're not totally foreign to this process, but one of them is we try to get a few landowners to sort of amass a lot of the properties so we don't have to deal with 15 or 8 different landowners. The more we can get people to purchase property and join them together, the more the master plan can become reality. Because like this original concept plan showed a road going through somebody's property 100%, and all of a sudden they look at us and say, well, wait a minute, you're putting a road right through my property. I have no use on my property. It's just a road. And so we really have to sit here and figure out how to do that, and we're working on that with the developers and the property owners. Another one to really make this achievable is roads. So when we did the other quadrant opposite Mayfield on the north side, we met with all the property owners and kind of convinced them if they donate the property for the right-of-way to the city, that the city would then go ahead and not have to buy the land. We'd spend the money constructing the road. So that's just what we did, and that's the extension of heritage is what we did there. And that really made it take off. So we're looking at this, and we're looking at how we can do that, and then where should the road really be to kind of make it work from a public works perspective. So I've been working with public works and the landowners, and I think we've hit some home runs so far. This is the district. So where the green star is on the lower left portion of the page, that's Broadwell Road. And you could see that there's a road just opposite that And when we have roads, we try to align them, right? From a public works perspective, they try to align the roads to keep the infrastructure working and flowing. So even though the property that's starred is not specifically in the district, we did have developer come in, purchase that property. There is an existing house on it, and the DRB last week approved that demolition for that house. And part of that is really because what I'm trying to do is get a road to mirror the one that's on the other side, to come across, and then I just have to make the connection to Mid-Broadwell. So I do it in segments because it's a little hard to do it all at once, but we've got the commitment to do it, and I'll show you how that's going to look. And okay, so the drawing keeps changing a little bit, but Broadwell Road is up on the top of this page, and you can see just on the opposite side of the yellow, here, I'll show my cursor, right here is Marstro Drive. So I'm trying to align that road with the road that would then come down and feed the Mayfield district. So that's the yellow arrow. And that property has now been purchased, and the owner has committed to dedicating the right-of-way that's in yellow to come across, come around. So now I'm at the edge of the arrow, and now I'm going to work on getting it from the edge of the arrow, the point of the arrow, to the balance of Mid-Broadwell. And so you could see here, there's the road up on the opposite side of Broadwell, and now the right-of-way is coming right up, coming all the way through, coming through here. Hopefully you can see my cursor, and then wrapping around. Now, once I get to the end of the property and then the top of the page, so to speak, I can go different directions, right? So if one landowner says no, I can go to another landowner. So I can kind of figure out how to keep those segments moving and make those connections work while working with Public Works to make sure that everything's working with alignments and speeds and things. And then part of the original concept plan, I'll just remind you, that was to sort of vacate in this area here, where it's just a right turn only, and then you can come down Mid-Broadwell, but it's really not, you can't really make that left. And the concept plan really said to kind of create a urban plaza there or some sort of civic space, which is what I'm looking to do. I'm actually looking to see if I can get that expanded a little bit to make it bigger and make it support more people. So I'm working on an idea there to enhance that whole civic experience in there. But that road portion would be vacated or at least limited access. And then once I make the other connection, then making this path, this edge connection here to Mayfield would be easy for me to do because that landowner's already committed to do that. So I just have one more segment to do, and I think I'll have all the roads figured out and donated as right-of-way. So that will take care of that aspect. So we're amassing properties, we're getting roads put in, and this was a big one, so getting this was really good. And there's a lot of people that worked on this together. It's not just me, there's a whole team. We had legal, everybody kind of helped us put this together. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody because it's really helpful. And it does take a village. And then the last one is the pond and drainage with stormwater. And I'm kind of starting to broach that idea because all this area has to drain somewhere. And that would be to the south part of the page or to the bottom part. And we're starting to approach those landowners to develop how that pond would look and to turn that into maybe a city park and to have a waterway similar to what we did on the north quadrant, north side of the quadrant, where we had a city park there. And then we'd have that. And then just south of that park, I've already gotten the right-of-way from Charlotte to Broadwell pretty much summed up. So that right-of-way could either be a vehicular right-of-way, or it could just be a pedestrian-only right-of-way where we do a nice 14-foot path, and we can have PTVs connecting. So there's all these options that we can come back and show council. But the secret here is to keep making those connections, to keep bringing it down, and then come back and say, look, what would the council like as far as implementation? But so I think we're making good progress here. And once we conclude and kind of complete this kind of phase of this concept plan, you'll see it come to fruition very quickly. That's when all of a sudden the roads are in, the drainage is in, land has been amassed. All of a sudden it just starts popping pretty quick. And it looks like, wow, what happened? It just starts happening. But it does pave the way to do it, to get it to work. So I just wanted to give you the good news on that. That just happened last week. And so that's really good. So any questions?
Yeah, a couple questions. Actually, will you go back to the slide you just had up there a second ago?
Yes.
Yeah. So that yellow road coming in from Marstro across the street, do you think that, I mean, that makes kind of that walkable area even bigger than what it was before, because you're creating an elbow over there as opposed to a tighter road going up, I guess, northwest from here. I think it's actually southwest, but it makes that area more walkable and bigger, right?
It makes it much more walkable and bigger. And because of that, I'm starting to think that we can make the vacated street portion, that civic portion, larger as well. So that's how I can get that civic portion to become larger, because now that I've elbowed this, instead of cutting it short, I made the area larger. It's good observation. And then it gives me the opportunity to make that civic space maybe enlarged a little bit in there, and we can have much more of a robust area. Maybe that civic space gets donated to the city and becomes city space. I really would like to get a publicly owned civic space in downtown Crabapple so that we can foster a lot of events and things like that. So that then we'd have different types of civic spaces. So we have the one that Orkin Associates have right across the street, which is a different envisionment of civic space. And then when we did the one with Beecham over there on his new development, I have a small park in the back, and that's a different type of civic space as well. So I'm trying to create multiple types of civic spaces in downtown Crabapple so that we have different types of uses, different sizes of civic spaces, different types. Like when we did the one across the street, it's bordered by some parking areas and roads. This type of civic space, what I'd like to see is it just get flanked and bordered by buildings. So the buildings kind of open up onto that civic space. So when you're in that civic space, you're interacting with all of those facades, all of that architecture, because the way we design this is all low-scale architecture. So it's not like that civic space would be walled in by high buildings. We limited the height to 2. So we really have, I think, some really nice openness to the civic space. It doesn't have to be as large as the one across the street, and I just think it would be different types of civic spaces, so we can have different types of events occurring in these areas. So make it kind of dynamic.
Any other questions for Bob? That's good. Yeah, I like the pedestrian stuff. You know, closing mid Broadwell is going to be, I think, a big positive. Any public comment on this?
They're not on this, no.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Bob.
Okay, certainly.
Will City Clerk please say on agenda item E?
E is the update on the green print plan for the green space bond properties. Our Public Works Director, Miss Emily Groth.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'll be providing an update on our green space properties as it relates to the Green Print Plan, a public works planning effort with assistance from Parks and Recreation and Communications. This is a continued conversation from previous updates presented to Council in late 2023. So we'll quickly review the current status of these properties and then dive into the Green Print Plan, including what we've done so far, what remains, and points for council feedback tonight. Before we begin, I'll provide a brief review of our green space acquisition program. In 2016, Milton voters approved $25 million in bonds for the purchase of conservation land in the interests of trails, natural areas, agricultural land, water quality, and park improvements. Since then, we've spent about $20 million through 8 purchases totaling more than 400 acres. And this is just a map and location of all of our green spaces. Of these properties, 3 are open or partially open, and 3 remain closed and undeveloped. And as a final refresher, our green print comes to us from a strategic plan goal to protect and enhance Milton's green spaces. And generally, the green print has focused on elements such as future improvements, environmental protection, and property prioritization. The key stakeholders that we've identified throughout this process include city committees made up of green space, trails, equestrian, and parks and recreation, as well as the property neighbors, the general public, and city council and staff. On the next few slides, we'll review what we've done so far and the feedback that we've gathered. In 2023, we began engaging with the city committees that I listed previously. We started with individual committee meetings, and then we formed a steering group of 2 members from each of those committees. We released 2 surveys, one to the adjacent neighbors and one to the general public. And later in 2023, we hosted 2 public input sessions. After that, we presented to council in October and November. In October, we discussed initial survey results and first draft conceptual plans. And in November, we considered possible improvements on closed properties in a shorter-term phased approach. Going into this year, we met with adjacent neighbors in January and February, and we offered one-on-one meetings with staff and engaged with the neighbors of Hamby Road, Cooper Sandy, and the Kennedy property. Some of the feedback that we gathered from the neighbors include these sentiments listed here: ensuring privacy and property boundaries and security, the possibility of diminished existing wildlife habitats from proposed plans, and the need to further prioritize properties based on feasible location, acreage, and utilization. The feedback that we gathered from the community survey I mentioned earlier included a slight majority for some type of property closure in the interest of conservation and wildlife. We should also expect to receive the results back from the 2024 National Community Survey, in which we asked a similar question on the right. How much would you support or oppose the following approaches for Milton's green spaces? 100% open, partially open, or 100% closed? And I believe we'll be discussing these survey results in full later this year. So we'll now get into the specifics related to usage and property considerations. As I mentioned previously, meetings with the neighbors expressed concerns related to unmarked property lines, trespassing, and disruptions to existing wildlife areas. We've had previous relationship with the organization Georgia Conservancy, who provided advisement early in our green space acquisition program. And when considering costs, we've discussed short-term opening needs like access, parking, property boundaries, and trail use, and ongoing operational expenses like land management and public safety. So we currently have that established steering group. We paused interaction with them as the council considered a possible ad hoc park planning group, but we are now ready to pick back up with them. And next, we'd like to seek advisement on possible wildlife protection areas that we've identified. This could be directly through the Georgia Conservancy or other engagement tools like qualified and engaged residents. And the following are our next steps. We'll update those conceptual maps based on the neighbor feedback that we gathered. We'll re-engage with that steering group. We'll plan to host our 3rd public meeting input session, and we'll come back to council for additional feedback and to discuss implementation. So as we close out the last few slides of this update, generally before we engage with those next steps, we'd like council feedback on a few things. The first idea being our proposed land designations. Conceptually, we've identified areas of each property that may best fit these uses, including passive recreation, wildlife protection areas, rural views and plant management, and buffer areas for adjacent neighbors. And so the first point for council feedback is generally conceptually if you agree with these land designation areas. This is one of the concept maps that we discussed last year with those buckets, for lack of a better term, highlighted in those different colors. I'll stop here for any discussion, and we can also review this and all the other points for feedback on the last slide.
Emily, so in that slide, because I remember that the green one, the shaded green, that's the bucket of, it'd be conserved, right?
Yeah,
But then
that's-
the other portions would be open to passive use?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the first proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all good. Any council have any concerns on that?
How are you deciding the size of the protection areas?
This one, for example, at Hamby Road, the conservation area is pretty in tandem with the floodplain that you can see, the other layer under that green. So we started with any areas that generally wouldn't be fit for any other use, similar to like water protection or floodplains, stream banks, things like that. So we started with what the natural features are of each property. So we'd also like feedback on possible improvements within each general land designation category. Generally, these things would be access and parking, amenities like picnic areas, what type of trail usage like equestrian, mountain biking, and what to do with existing structures on the properties. And I'll stop here again for any discussions related to these items, and we can continue on the last slide coming up.
All look good. Any council feedback on that?
Yeah, I don't have any feedback.
So as we close this update, we'd just like to offer the opportunity for feedback related to these items listed below, types of land designation, and how we can seek additional advisement on determining those land designations if the council is interested in something like that, as well as what improvements and activities and areas of interest should we preserve on each property. And lastly, any public input content that you'd like to see that we haven't mentioned, that we haven't gathered previously at our third public meeting.
Is the committee going to give us a priority list of what parcels they would deem priority 1, 2, and 3 or anything like that?
They haven't analyzed that yet, but
Okay.
we can certainly bring that back to you.
Anything else? Do we have any public comment on this?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Good? All right. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The city clerk, please sound agenda item F.
F is the fiscal year 2025 budget preparation, discussion, and feedback. Deputy City Manager, Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. 1 second. We are here this evening. Our budget process officially kicked off earlier this year, and staff worked through April to prepare preliminary forecasts for continuing operations as well as new initiatives. Staff met with council back on May 3rd for our annual retreat, where we received feedback on topics such as sustainability, public art, land use, transportation and mobility, and parks and recreation. This feedback has been incorporated into our budget forecast work, and tonight we are here to kick off meeting number 1 of the budget input meetings for staff to ensure we are in full alignment with council feedback and to provide council and the community with an opportunity to see the budget in preparation for the millage rate process later this summer. Here's our agenda for tonight's meeting. We will go over the main objectives for the input meetings, a timeline for the budget process inclusive of the process to set the millage rate. We'll present a general overview of Milton's 7-year capital improvement plan, including a look at the pay-as-you-go funding strategy utilized. We will then go over the funding considerations for the new active athletic complex, and Public Works Director Sarah Leaders will lead the conversation on the McConnell Chadwick House and the Mayfield Farm Park, which is our shared park with the city of Alpharetta. Along the way, we'll be seeking some input and guidance on these three projects, which will inform our projections within the 7-year capital improvement plan, which will be before you in its entirety in a later meeting for review. On this slide, you can see the anticipated timeline for our additional budget input meetings. This schedule will allow staff the opportunity to bring segments of the budget before you throughout July and August, allowing for feedback from council as well as the community. On July 8th, we will discuss revenue forecasts. If we do not have the digest from Fulton County at that time, we will discuss the remaining revenue sources and then move to property tax revenues at a future meeting. At July 15th, our department heads will bring forth new initiatives for consideration and feedback. In the final July meeting, we will discuss the 5-year forecast for expenditures. And by that time, we should be prepared to begin our millage rate hearings. Depending on the calculation of the rollback rate compared to our current millage rate, which was utilized in last year's 5-year forecast, we will yield how many hearings we need to have for that setting of the millage rate. So we'll determine that over the next month or so. In August, we will have the budget workshop where council will have the opportunity to see the draft proposed budget all together in one place and adopt that millage rate. And in September, we will hold the 2 official public hearings for the budget, as well as adopt the fiscal year 2025 budget on that September 16th meeting. Any questions about that schedule before we move on? So our capital improvement plan is a comprehensive tool that assists with the planning, acquisition, and financing of capital projects. Milton prepares a 7-year plan, which is updated annually. As we know, things change from time to time, including priorities, funding sources, as well as resource availability. Our code requires a 5-year forecast for capital, but staff felt that a 7-year look helped inform our long-term financial planning more accurately. The CIP includes all funding sources from pay-as-you-go, T-SPLOS, grants, bonds, when we have those, and more. Milton primarily utilizes the pay-as-you-go approach outside of programs like T-SPLOS and grants, which is an operating transfer from the general fund, which is funded with property taxes, lost revenues, and other general fund revenue sources. In the table below, you will see the current amended budget for fiscal year 2024 for the operating transfers out of the general fund into the capital projects fund, inclusive of the updates that were approved by council back in April. The data for fiscal year 2025 through 2028 before you is from last year's 5-year forecast, and we'll be updating these projections through our process over the summer. So you'll see those new updated projections, inclusive of the requests from staff at the meetings throughout July. So here we have the conversation about the new active athletic complex. As Tom mentioned earlier this evening, we will get better forecasts for the actual funding from our consultant. Absent of having that at this time, staff has put together some projections based on seeing other projects for Parks and Recreation and what pricing those have come in at versus our original projections. And we've set a $28 million inclusive of the land acquisition and the build at starting estimate for the project. Those estimates will be updated as we get that pricing back from the consultant, as well as when a concept is approved by council, then we'll set the official budget once that concept is approved. So now we need to look at kind of some feedback on ways to fund this project. On the right-hand side, you'll see the potential pay-as-you-go funding sources. As you know, the city, again, utilizes that pay-as-you-go program. We put aside a little bit of money every year towards the final build-out of many projects. So we have had set aside for land acquisition some funding, and the new athletic complex already had some funding available, that $3.2 million and that $14.6 million. In addition, through the PAYGO program, we have $2.3 million set aside to start funding an active indoor community center, as well as $2.4 million for Providence Park. Last summer, we talked about prioritizing the phasing of that location. And we also talked about in the green print, as well as some other passive park needs, we set aside $1.1 million to have for the potential of utilizing towards those once those are decided upon. Those are some funding sources that we could utilize and move towards this project to fund them to avoid any type of bonding or any kind of things like that. And then we can look at reprioritizing those projects as additional funding comes in over the next few years. As you know, through our conservative funding methods, we typically have more funding at the end of the year than anticipated. They can go towards restocking those programs should council want to go with this approach. Also looking at, to get to that $28 million number, the potential sale of the Hopewell Road property, if the Crescent property is the way we're headed, that we can recoup at minimum. We're hoping that $4.9 million, which is the sale price of that property or the purchase price of that property we bought it. So again, I would like any kind of feedback at this time to kind of say this is a good, approach that we're taking, because then we will take that feedback and put it into our CIP. So when you see it in its entirety, you will see some of those other projects through the amendment process at the end of this year, as well as the request process for 25, not showing funding for things like Providence Park and the community center if council gives that feedback this evening.
Council, any questions on that?
The project cost itself, you're going to update that right after Tom gets that information, right? So-
Absolutely, yes,
so
sir. And then
that'll-
it'll be updated once again, once that concept design is officially approved, and kind of get some more guidance there. So this is the first consultant, then we'll have the next layer.
When's the due diligence end on Crescent again?
We're close.
Okay, so, but we'll have a better numbers by then, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of the feedback we'll be looking for at that time. So say tonight we do say, yes, this is the direction we want to go, utilize the funding that was set aside for these other projects. If it comes in under, then we will have a separate conversation about which of these 3 projects would you like us to start funding again first. So we can talk about that as the pricing comes in.
Well, I think out of all the buckets that we have in our city, I think y'all did a pretty good job of selecting the ones, so, yeah.
So we'll move forward with this strategy. And now we have Sarah Leaders to talk about the other 2 parts of our project.
So for this, we wanted to talk about the McConnell Chadwick House, the possible donation, looking at programming this as a project and initiative with possible future funding and next steps related to this house and property. So I'll go through the location and history, show where the property is, some background information on what we've done so far, talk about an assessment for preservation, funding and vision, and next steps. So this house and property holds historic significance and has unique architectural elements. It's prominently located along State Route 140, Arnold Mill Road, just beyond the Cherokee line. So a unique entryway feature into the city. So is adjacent to the Chadwick landfill and near the Cherokee County line. This site plan shows a survey that was performed for the property, as well as a potential subdivision line as part of the possible donation. So the current zoning of this parcel has C1 in the front. So the dash line kind of through the middle is the zoning designation line, and the rear is AG1 with a future land use for retail and service. The entire parcel that holds multiple structures is 5.04 acres. And as this division is shown, it's proposed that tract 1, where the historic property is located, would be about 1.85 acres, and the remainder would be the 3.18. This is proposed. It's not been submitted for recording yet until we finalize the donation terms and agreement. So let's see. Start with the background that you all first heard about this property in September of 2023. And since that time, we've had several site visits with the Milton Historical Society, as well as the current property owner. We've utilized legal services for the land acquisition review, including a draft donation agreement, the survey that I showed on the previous slide. For the land division, we've done some environmental assessments, and the remaining item that's still underway is the assessment for how we preserve this structure. So it took us some time to find the right fit for conducting this analysis for us. We didn't want to overanalyze it, but to come up with what measures we would need to look for where there's current deterioration or damage or structural issues. We wanted to look at the integrity of the walls and the other components of the structure itself, look at the roofing and the siding, the exterior walls, and what would need to be replaced. We wanted to get some recommendations as well as estimates for ongoing maintenance and those preservation efforts to prevent further deterioration of the exterior. This could include small things like cleaning, repairs and protective measures. Here's some of the photos of the different architectural features of the house, as well as some of the places that we would want to look to keep water from entering the structure. It also has a well house that sits on the property that we're having reviewed as well. So part of this item tonight was to introduce the idea of creating a capital project for this house. Funding would be to be determined once we get this structural assessment completed. We'd want to look at funding for preservation, which would really secure the structure and limit any further deterioration. We'd like to suggest collaborating with the Milton Historical Society on a future vision for this structure and property, including community engagement, to really look at what the usage and vision could be for it, with possible grant funding for some more substantial changes and improvements and really restoration of the house. So initially, we're just looking at how do we preserve it and what do we need to do to make sure it remains standing and is that prominent feature. So unfortunately, I don't have that assessment completed yet. We're hoping to have that early July to have those numbers of what we would want to look at in the first years of the donation, determine what that funding is, and we'll definitely bring that back as soon as we have it at a future council meeting as part of future budget presentation. So the next steps would be, following hearing the preservation report, would be finalizing that donation agreement, which would kick off the final due diligence. We've completed most of it, so we would anticipate moving to the land division and closing pretty quickly after that donation agreement is presented for your consideration. And that is all the slides on that particular property. I'll pause there for any questions.
Any questions on McConnell Chadwick? Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. Next up, we want to revisit the property of, we call it the Mayfield Farm property. So this is similar, just wanted to discuss the initiative. This one already exists as a capital project, but just wanted to talk about some immediate next steps as well as possible future funding to support a future vision for this property. This is a group of parcels we jointly own with the city of Alpharetta. It's located about 500 feet outside the Milton city limits along Mayfield Road, 12-acre former homestead, and it has three main houses with multiple accessory structures. In 2017, an acquisition memorandum of understanding was approved by both cities to describe the cost share for purchasing this property together. We've discussed a partnership IGA. The acquisition MOU also discussed it, and both cities have started the discussions of those starting last year. The demolition phase was discussed as an initial way to move forward with getting a blank slate for that property, and there's been substantial staff level discussions and continuing conversations about what the future of this property could be. Currently, we do some limited ground maintenance, and it's basically just to mow and keep the trees and weeds from going too much. We share that cost with Alpharetta, and they manage the equipment to conduct the mowing. The buildings are continuing to deteriorate there. There's no maintenance, and it's not securely closed. So our next immediate step is going to be to proceed with a demolition cleanup phase. And this, like I said, was discussed in March of last year, March of 2023, and funding was allocated into the capital account to handle this demolition phase. Alpharetta is proposing to issue the demolition permit as well as prepare the bid for that work. We would need to consider, because we don't have a cost share in place or a IGA for the partnership, we would look for something just to get this phase going. Mentioned we do have an existing capital account for Mayfield Farm. Demolition phase hopefully will come in under this 130 because there has been some of these smaller structures have been removed since the last time that estimate was provided. And we're proposing a 50-50 split, so about 65,000 each. We do have additional funding in this account. We have 90,000, so we'd have some remaining for some master planning, but we would want to look at future funding as we determine what the future vision of this property could be in the agriculture or environmental type usage. So we've started talking about that future partnership IGA, and these are some of the things that would fall under that would be the decision-making, how we do the planning, maintenance, capital improvements, as well as general cost split on everything we do on the property. So the vision in the near term is to get this kind of blank slate of the property, get all the structures that aren't being used removed, as well as improve the safety of the property. In the future, the bigger vision is to look for some agricultural and environmental type usage, such as a community garden. It could be its own Mayfield Farm grower row, similar to some of the operations that Alpharetta already supports at the Rucker Road Farm. And Anita's here. She's worked a lot with Alpharetta on the discussion of what this property could be. So if you have any questions on that, I'm going to defer to her. I'm just handling the demolition and the capital side of the property for right now. So our next steps are we do have funding for the demolition. Just wanted to reintroduce this, that there will be an IGA related to that particular part of the property, and we'll continue working on a larger partnership IGA as well as future planning. So no immediate changes needed to the budgeting. We have the funding for the demolition. We have some master planning funding, but just to put out there that as we look towards that larger vision of the community garden or environmental education, there could be potential need for additional funding in this account. Any questions on that one?
I got one quick one. Why, maybe it's not a quick one, why don't we do the master plan and future funding before we do the demo? I mean, well, I guess my question is, I'm worried we're going to be spending money on something that we might not be all aligned on with our other priorities that I see that we're kind of putting aside already. So my question is, can we wait to do the demo until we get the master plan done? I don't know. I haven't had any discussions with Alfredo, so that might be a question for Anita or.
I think that's something we could definitely consider, would be looking at that planning effort first. I know Alfredo's initial concerns were that there were people entering the property, and maybe Steve can talk more to his conversations with the Alpharetta city administrator.
I want to be a good partner, but as we went through just what we just looked at on the active parks, we're sacrificing some stuff in order to get that done. And I don't want to continue to put money into something that we might not actually be on the same page with. So until we start spending money on demoing, why don't we figure out what the whole plan's going to look like? So
I think from a risk mitigation standpoint, having those open buildings there creates exposes us to certain potential issues. And that was why Alpharetta originally approached us last year about raising them. In fact, they were supposed to be demolished last year, but if you drive by there, you'll see that some of the buildings have become just skeletons of buildings, and the doors are removed, and it's an attractive nuisance that could be a problem, and we own half of it.
fair statement. I guess they're pushing it and we're not pushing it. Is that a fair statement? I mean, is this being driven by them? As far as, can we do a master plan before we do the demo? I mean, that was kind of the question.
The initial demolition phase was proposed by Alpharetta to, let's go ahead and get the buildings down, get us a blank slate, and then the vision becomes a little easier to see when it's an open property. And they've had some challenges, I think, getting all the permitting in line for for the demolition. So that's been the delay between March of '23 and now, was just that lag in getting the permit issued. So, unless there's a desire to possibly move some funding, I think moving ahead with the demolition will really jumpstart that master planning. I know it seems to be the opposite way, that you should do the planning first, but in this case, with the attractive nuisance that those structures present, would recommend the moving ahead with the demolition as funded.
Ken, what kind of risk are we at here?
It's not significant risk from my perspective as far as imminent, but whenever you've got structures that are abandoned, whenever you've got the opportunity for them to be accessed by the public, it is better to get them. That's just the way it goes. Any risk manager would say the same. So, I concur.
Yeah, I want Alfred's council and this council kind of get on the same page of what our long-term plan is with this, because I know this was purchased in 2016-ish. Is that about right?
2017.
2017, so it's kind of time we start talking about it and get a plan, and if we don't agree on it, then maybe we need to just move on, so. Any other council questions? No? All right.
Just to wrap up the conversation, bring it back to a budget perspective. So again, that particular project won't have any budgetary changes within what you're going to see coming before you. We do have a placeholder for the McConnell Chadwick House. Should council want to keep moving in that direction, we do have some contemplated funding for that in the 7-year plan.
Yep, that makes sense. Any public comment on this?
We do, Mayor. We have 4 public comment cards.
Okay, if you'll read the first one.
I'd like to invite Jeff Dufresne to the podium, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Before I moved to Milton, I had worked with the Urban Land Institute for about a decade. And the mission, it's a global organization, and the mission is simply the responsible use of the land. And through that experience, I learned that a community is defined not only by what it creates, but what it refuses to destroy. Historic preservation is holding on to things that are well designed, linking us to the past in a meaningful way, and having plenty of good use after they've been left. Opportunities for the McConnell Chadwick House are anything from a welcome center, a museum, a gateway to Milton on a highly trafficked artery. It's a well-designed asset, Greek Revival architecture, long porch, fluted door columns. Bob Gamble will elaborate on all its historical architectural assets. And the McConnell Chadwick House also tells a story. History is all about telling story. It's about Eli McConnell, a brigadier general, a state senator, a postmaster, a sheriff, a land speculator. He owned 3,500 acres, and he helped create Milton County. Last week, I went to my 50th high school reunion at Deerfield Academy. It's a school that was built in Massachusetts, 1797. And I consider that one of the best experiences of my life, and I'm fortunate my parents sent me there. It has a dozen homes built between 1730 and 1865. It has no relationship, obviously, with the Deerfield here, but each house tells a different story about the people that lived here. Even the servants that lived there, and they're commemorated. And through historic preservation, Deerfield, Massachusetts has created a unique brand as one of the most preserved villages and rural landscapes in North America. By losing our distinctive historic assets like the McConnell Chadwick House, Milton is at risk of becoming any town USA. So I respectfully ask the City Council to consider budgeting adequate funds in 2025 to preserve the McConnell Chadwick House. And the Milton Historical Society would be most honored and grateful to participate in the future vision and community engagement of that exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mr. Bill Lusk.
I'm Bill Lusk. I live at 1355 Summit Road, Fields Crossroads, Georgia. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, City Manager, Assistant City Manager, Counselor. I'm here this evening to encourage you to accept the donation of the McConnell-Chadwick Homestead along with the associated costs involved in its stabilization and hopefully in its eventual restoration for community use. This project is not without precedence. Several years ago, the city of Milton purchased the Thomas Bird Jr. House up on Hopewell Road. It was built in the mid-1840s. It's a historical gem. It has been put to practical use as a meeting place for North Fulton Senior Center, a revenue-producing source for the city. Built in the late 1830s during the infamous Trail of Tears event, Eli McConnell was well connected with the events of that time, including service to the state of Georgia and the federal government, and he built that house. Our surrounding neighbors of Roswell, Alpharetta, Johns Creek, and Cherokee County likewise have their historic structures that they have preserved, and they have become known for their commitment to their rural heritage. We as a young city have spent considerable time and resources to create our own brand, when in fact it has been with us for nearly 200 years. Certainly our rural heritage is a noble moniker for who we are, but the horse is not the whole story. The family who created this area are the ones who made it happen. To preserve the homes that they lived in and raised families in nearly 200 years ago form the rural heritage to which we now lay claim. Not long ago, we passed a $25 million green space bond as our legacy to preserve open space for passive and active parkland. It was the right thing to do. However, when that green space is gone, it's gone. They just don't make it anymore. The same is true with historic structures. When they are gone, they are gone. And when that happens, part of our rural heritage that we claim goes with it. As a former city councilman and proponent of historic preservation, both in my professional life and in my private life, I urge you to do what is best for the city of Milton. Thoughtfully consider to accept the donation it is offered and pledge to provide the funding needed to stabilize and restore the McConnell-Chadwick House to its former grandeur. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please call the next speaker.
Joan Borzarilli. And Mayor, Ken, we're at 2 minutes left in the 10-minute. Is that okay? We'll do it because we have two more, this one and one more.
That's right.
How much time? What do we got? It's 2 minutes per speaker with total of 10 minutes total, so.
We're at 8. We have
Okay, yeah, and yeah, you can definitely speak. I'm just trying to figure out what.
just
how
two
much-
more, 2 and 2.
Okay,
We'll do
got
2
it,
and 2.
yeah, you're good. You can speak too, Joan, if you want. Okay. You said that, I didn't.
enforcement cleanup.
Good evening. My name is Bob Gamble. I actually live in Canton, but I feel like we have historical links since the house we're discussing was in old Cherokee County, and so was Milton, way back before it was Milton. So,
Real quick, can you say your address for the record?
yes,
please?
indeed. I live at 302 Woodridge Pass, Canton.
Thank you.
Okay. And I am speaking because for about 40 years, I'm a retired architectural historian, and so my last segment of my career from 1985 until my retirement in 2014 was as the chief architectural historian with the Alabama Historical Commission. And before that, I worked in Washington with the Department of the Interior and was, in ancient days, part of the first staff of the National Register of Historic Places. So I've seen a lot of ground in all these years and observed a lot of projects. And I'm still a firm believer that these projects are worthwhile and can indeed happen, even though sometimes the mountains were pretty high to climb when we first got involved. But the main thing I'd like to talk about tonight is not me, of course, but is about the building itself. Several years ago, the city of Milton did what I consider a very outstanding plan, which incorporated not just environmental conservation, but cultural conservation, i.e. historic preservation, as part of the goal to improve the quality of life and maintain the quality of life in this area. And at that time, they identified the Chadwick House, or the McConnell-Chadwick House, as one of the 3 or 4 oldest structures in Milton. In fact, with the exception of the Thomas Byrd House, Bill Lusk alluded to, this is, as far as we can tell, the oldest residential structure standing in the present bounds of the city. In fact, when it was built, it was in Cherokee County, and then, of course, in Milton, and is now in Fulton County. But the interesting thing is that it also is not just distinguished because of its age, but because it really represents a hinge moment in North Georgia history and the history of this area in particular. And by that hinge moment, I mean the time just after the Trail of Tears, just as the last of the Cherokees were exiled and just as the log cabin frontier was disappearing and would result a few years later in the establishment of the city of Atlanta further down the road. So this building, of course, predates by several years the city of Atlanta itself, much less Milton. And interestingly, it also represents a hinge in terms of architectural style. And while it is an unprepossessing looking rural house, just to drive by on 140, where it is today, it represents the beginning of permanent construction in what had been a historically frontier place. And the most interesting thing to me is that it is you might say, a country cousin of the old the great pillared Greek revival houses just down the road in Roswell. I won't get into the forensic details of that, but forensically, as well as the documentation that Joan Borzelleri and Pat Miller and others have put together, indicates very strongly that not only is the house of the period around 1840, perhaps even a little earlier, maybe a couple of years later, but it was very likely designed as certainly the builder of places like Bullock Hall, Mimosa Hall, and some of the landmarks around Roswell, was also involved in the building and design of the Chadwick House. So you really have a pearl of great price, you might say, right here in very young Milton, a really venerable landmark. The builder, incidentally, was a Connecticut Yankee. He was Willis Ball from Windsor, Connecticut, the builder in Roswell, I should say. And he is the one who was likely involved in this construction. And they're if any of you are ever interested in the tedious details, I can point out why this house has features of what we used to call Yankee Greek Revival, transplanted to Roswell, and from Roswell out here in what was deep country with Eli McConnell. So it's a very, very significant house, I think, from the standpoint of history and architecture. And I'll close by saying that in my many years of observing things, situations like this, I think you all are in a particularly advantageous position in that you have an owner who's willing to donate. You're in an area that is vibrant, well-educated citizenry, and you have the means. But you have to devise, of course, a long-range strategy for things like this. I have also learned that if you bite the apple, try to bite it all at once, you're going to choke on it. So this is going to be a long-range program. It's eating the apple one small bite at a time, with staging it with the proper kinds of intermediate intervention, and then gradually the program will unfold along the way. So I feel privileged to speak to you all tonight, and thrilled that things have progressed as far as they have with regard to the old McConnell House. If there are any comments or questions?
No, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Joan, you want to speak? You turned in a comment card, so.
Hard to follow that. Anyway, Joan Borzalleri, 540 Kings County Court, Milton, Georgia, 30004, Secretary of the Milton Historical Society, and also a member of the Chadwick House Preservation Committee. I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight, and this is the 10,000-foot view of preservation in Milton. We have history, but it needs to be documented, it needs to be saved, and it needs to be told. The city of Milton started the ball rolling on the saving of a lot of history when City Council authorized 28 historical markers to be installed. And that generated a whole lot of interest in local history. And even today, they say, how can we read the markers? They don't realize it's on the city website, where you don't have to pull up and risk your life trying to pull up by the side of the road and read the markers. You can look at it on the city. We're doing a presentation tomorrow at the Senior Center, 3 of us on the board. And the first thing I did was print out all of the historical markers and their text. And so those are handouts to the seniors, and hopefully they'll be able to, I did it in large type. They'll be able to read it. So anyway, when the markers went in, and we had just a lot of fun for 2 years researching all the markers, and there were not a lot of resources at that time. There was not a whole lot on the internet, et cetera. But anyway, that Bill Lusk was probably the main instigator in forming the Milton Historical Society. And since we moved up here from Dunwoody in '96, there have been a number of grassroots volunteer initiatives that have resulted in conservation and preservation. And these are quality of life and property values issues. First became acquainted with the Birmingham Hopewell Alliance, and they were proponents of the AG1 zoning and a number of other land use initiatives. Then Preserve Rural Milton, which was a main instigator for the passage of the Green Space Bond. And then the Milton Historical Society, and also the Chadwick House Preservation Committee. We called attention to the district at Mayfield, the Double Branch Courthouse, which is undergoing all spring thanks to Bill Lusk and company renovation, and the McConnell Chadwick House. We put in the budget for the Historical Society 3 professional title searches, and 2 of those are houses at the district of Mayfield, and the other one is the McConnell Chadwick House. So these are all grassroots initiatives that say how important we think preservation, land use, and conservation are. The Georgia Trust believes the Chadwick House is historically and structurally significant. We were honored to be named to the 2023 Places in Peril, and each one of the 10 houses named each year gets a nice poster and a lot of publicity, et cetera. And so we think that the Georgia Trust has placed their trust in us to preserve the house. They've also encouraged us to apply for National Register status. It'd be the only house in Milton if it was so designated, and work is ongoing on that. We turned in the preliminary application in October, and we're working on the second round of that. It's become quite onerous and quite intense to produce documentation. According to funding information, more preservation grants are available to nonprofits and municipal governments. And the Georgia Trust has 2 that we might consider. The 1772 grant, which is a $10,000 grant, and then the Callahan grant. And these are only available to nonprofits and municipalities. So I hope you'll consider funding the McConnell-Chadwick House stabilization and possible restoration. And we'd like to recognize Larry Chadwick's generous donation. I'd also like to thank city staff, especially Sarah Leaders, for their intensive work on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, Mr. Chadwick, we appreciate everything that he did, and giving us that donation was a big deal. We're looking forward to seeing how we can preserve the property. So good stuff. Do you have anything else, Bernadette, or are you good? You're good?
For this evening.
Okay. Any executive session?
There is not.
None? Okay. I'll have a motion to adjourn the work session.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right, a motion from Councilman Jacobus and a second from Councilman Johnson to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.